What does it take to lead with empathy, vision, and cultural impact in a changing world? Today, I sit down with Michele Y. Smith, the dynamic CEO of the Museum of Pop Culture, to explore her journey from the Milton Hershey School to leading one of the most innovative cultural institutions in the country. We talk people first leadership, the power of pop culture, navigating trauma with grace, and why transparency and wellness might just be the most radical leadership tools of our time. Let's dig in. Enjoy. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to become better versions of ourselves and make a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today's show is celebrating pop culture and people-centered leadership in a changing world with Michele Y. Smith. Michele currently serves as the CEO of the Museum of Pop Culture, known as MOPOP. She is a mission-focused leader with extensive experience in business development, operations, and finance in the nonprofit industry. Her people-centered leadership approach is the driving force behind her work at MOPOP, which emphasizes a steadfast dedication to the democratization of philanthropy, the universal language of pop culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility and membership of emerging leaders. Prior to her role at MOPOP, Michele served as the Chief Business and Financial Officer at the award-winning cultural institution, the Woodland Park Zoo. Michele, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you for having me today.
All right, we're going to be talking about some good stuff. Your life's purpose, your mission, your current purpose, your current mission, and how they're all coming together. And I just want to start by saying, when I went on the website of MOPOP, which I had not seen, it is an absolutely stunning architectural work of art.
Well, thank you. It's a Frank Gehry building, so it's 140,000 square feet, and it has 13 different galleries, and we're very excited to have this wonderful museum that is going to be celebrating 25 years in June.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely beautiful. And that's just the outside, everyone. So this is all about us getting in the inside in so many different areas. So Michele, I first wanted to ask, did you find leadership or did leadership find you?
I think leadership has always been in my life by the example of my mother, who has always really instilled some of the things that have forwarded me down my path to leadership. I also spent some time at Milton Hershey School, which is in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And Milton Catherine Hershey really formed that school for kids like myself, marginalized kids that had a background of one parent not being around. And so a lot of my leadership journey started there at that boarding school. You know, Milton and Catherine Hershey didn't have kids, and they use, if you eat a Hershey bar or any Hershey product, you actually, I'm a product of philanthropy. And so I've grown up in that world and afforded the opportunity for my own schooling at Milton Hershey School to support me as I moved out into the world in my formative years.
So now we know a little bit more about why philanthropy is so important to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, my whole school was my schooling at the end of 12th grade. It's a boarding school in Hershey. It's about an hour outside of Philadelphia. But my food, my health care, the clothes I wore, dental work, all that was awarded on a scholarship. And I went to the
Wow.
school from 4th to 12th grade. I was able to come home on the weekends, but it was around $2 million that were spent out of the endowment of the Milton Hershey School.
What an immersive and life-changing experience.
Yeah. I mean, we like to say, 10,000 brothers and sisters around the world.
Hmm.
That is part of my community that I, draw my experience from, or partnerships or friendships. Most of my friends in my life that I spend most of my time with, even in here in Seattle, have been either my roommates or schoolmates
Hmm.
within Milton Hershey School. So it started at the young age of being in fourth grade at 10 years old.
So what a gift. And what how did you get this gift? Like what how did you get selected? There's some special sauce here, clearly.
I don't know if there's any special sauce, but when you're interested in Milton Hershey School, you get an opportunity to visit, but also there's a series of tests that they take. Some are psychological to see how you would be able to be away from home. I don't
Hmm.
know what all the tests are because I honestly forget. My brother also had the opportunity, and I think he was awarded to get in before me, but my mom wanted us to both go to experience at the same time. And she had been going to school herself to be a doctor, and I think one of her friends had put their child in the school, and that's how she learned about it. And
Hmm.
so we talked about it, and we really talked about what the opportunity would mean for myself, but also for her. She was a single mom with two kids, and so she said, this will help you
Hmm.
understand social capabilities, because at the school it wasn't just me and my color, it was the diversity of people from all around the world and marginalized communities, giving the opportunity for a full scholarship. And so
Hmm.
I took it and ran with it, and it was
Yeah.
it's been the gift that continues to keep on giving. It's kind of made up who I am. And sitting here as the CEO of the Museum of Pop Culture, I really understand what philanthropy can do for an individual, but also what it can do for an institution itself.
Hmm. So, an extraordinary woman raising an extraordinary woman. Your mom. So, what I had read is your mom was a professional ballerina, and now she went on to medical school.
My mom had, she was a lifelong learner. So my mom started out as a school teacher. I was really supposed to be born in February, but I was born in December.
Hmm.
So I'm a strong Sagittarius. And she was working as a teacher in a very bad area of schools and was punched by one of her students and then
Wow.
went into labor.
Oh.
And then came me in December of 1971. But she went on as one of the first Black ballerinas, but then became looking into grants and working on boards and in finance. And she had several degrees, but her passion was really working with the brain. She became a doctor herself, and really a behavioral specialist. And so she, encouraged me to go after any passion that I wanted. But her start was with school. And education, and then she went on to the arts, and then she went into finance and grants, and then moved on to the medical field. And she was just a lifelong passionate learner like myself.
Remarkable. Was there a moment, or was this cumulative moments, when you decided you wanted to be in charge? You wanted to be a director, you wanted to be a leader, and then ultimately a chief executive officer?
Well, in Milton Hershey School, we had the opportunity to be in a society called the Leadership Society. And so that really kind of formed my way of being a leader. And so that really kind of took you through leadership in itself, based on the foundation of Milton and Catherine Hershey. Milton Hershey failed so many times when he was forming the Hershey Chocolate Company. And so some of the formative years of fourth through 12th grade, I had the opportunity to join the Leadership Society when I was in the school. I think that's when I learned about leadership. It's where I definitely had the opportunity to learn about business. There were several tracks that you could take, whether you could do farming, or you could do electricity, or you could do plumbing. I chose the business route. And so that put me on the path. And I remember there was one teacher, her name was Addie Shepard. It was one of the hardest classes I ever had, but it was very entrepreneurial. At the start of my 10th grade year, you would go through these formative classes that would allow you to own your own business. And it was accounting. And so I remember she would say, Michelle, you're going to have to go on the audit trail when things weren't balancing, when the math wasn't mathing. And I found that to be very, interesting for me. And that's where I learned a lot of my typing and business skills. I took a typing class. I don't even know if they do that in school anymore.
I don't think so. I remember mine in ninth grade. Yes.
Yeah. And so I took a typing class. I took a accounting class with this whole packet of running a store. And I really loved that part of it. And ended up in my senior year winning a business award before I graduated. So I think that started back.
You're on the track. You were on the track
I was
early.
on the track. Yeah. Got my feet wet a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And you've dealt with leader adversity in leadership, and what I mean by that contextually. So not only were you a leader at the zoo during COVID, but what I had to dig to find was how many years? 20 years before that, director of flight attendants at San Francisco International during 9/11.
Yes.
Which just gives me the chills, to even think back and feel that, where some of those our planes came out of SFO, and you lost some of your people. And I just can only imagine, and I'm curious as to what the lessons were in leadership, particularly as a young leader in 9/11, navigating uncharted and horrific territory.
Thank you. I was SFOSW, and I can actually give you my number, 273797. That means I was 27,000 of an employee of United Airlines at the time. And it was interesting how I got to SFOSW. Those two flights were my flight attendants. I had flown flight 93 the week before. So that's how close that question is to my heart. And it was unexpected. But when you work for the airlines, you are super prepared. I was a flight attendant manager of 4,000 flight attendants at SFOSW, and then broke it out to 400 that were actually in my care. And at the airlines, you always need to be qualifying for the aircrafts that you're in. You're carrying an FAA handbook. And that is just part of your DNA of practice of what happens if something terrible happens on the plane, whether it's a crash, whether it's somebody getting sick, whether you're going to be delayed, all of those things. And I think that there was training that was ingrained in me as a flight attendant to always be prepared. Although that incident was, out of the blue for us, and it just kicked in the training. We knew we would practice what if something would go down, never knowing that it would. And it just sticks with you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I did anything heroic. It's just that it was already ingrained in me. But it was from there, I think I learned a lot on the aftermath when we went through it. As you know, United Airlines went through bankruptcy at the time. We did a lot of layoffs. There was a lot of feelings in reference to, those were some of my flight attendants that passed away. Mm-hmm. I was on the crisis care team, and so I would fly to the crash sites myself and learn and talk to parents and members and things that went on. And I think that's where a lot of my lessons learned for empathy at the same time, and understanding how to run a business and an operation, where flight attendants didn't want to fly again. We weren't sure where we were going. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know if we were going to war. And I think, I learned a lot from there.
Where you mentioned empathy, and I know empathy is part of your people-centered leadership approach, a huge part. How did your approach develop? How do you recall it materializing? Because from what I have learned about you, it is core to your being.
I think that everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, right? And that's where we're all the same. But you never know what's going on in someone's everyday life or what has happened before you get on the phone or have a meeting with them. And so for me, empathy is about understanding who is uniquely in front of you so that you can have a thoughtful and authentic conversation, because empathy builds trust, right? And when you're in an organization and you're working with someone, you want to have trust in who you're speaking with. And having that vulnerability and that authenticity
Hmm.
helps you become the leader that you are. And so it took a lot of practice and time, and, it just continued to evolve over my years of my leadership journey. It's something
Hmm.
that I have at the forefront of every conversation. And, I've failed many times where I've come in probably a little bit too hot and then thought about it and used a different approach or went back to apologize or unpack.
Hmm.
And it takes a little bit of humility on yourself to admit that you're wrong or you could have done things in a better way. I'm
Hmm.
constantly always thinking about that, of how can I improve, how looking at a different situation. And really, that's how I deal with my teams. Not everything that you're going to execute is going to work perfectly,
No.
but it's about the debrief and your
Hmm.
mindset of
Hmm.
using that failure as an opportunity for growth.
Yes.
And when I learned that, I think that's where it clicked.
Hmm.
Using your failure as an opportunity for growth and not worrying about who did what. When somebody gets in an argument or something happens or, something didn't launch right, we're always looking at the human of why they did it wrong. Like
Hmm.
Susie did it wrong.
Right.
It wasn't really Susie that did it wrong. It was the process.
Right.
And so when I talk to
Right.
my team, I talk about where were the blindfolds or what broke in the process? Did we
Hmm.
not have a policy to communicate what was going to happen? Did we not foresee what was going on so that we could make it better? And so when something fails, it's not an opportunity to play the name or blame game. It's an opportunity to polish.
Yes. Yes. That's a wonderful approach, and I love the idea of failure equals opportunity. And it's such an important perspective. No one likes to make a mistake. No one likes to fail, and particularly people in leadership positions are under a lot of pressure and a microscope and light to get it right and to do it right. And so I just appreciate your humility of even saying, yeah, sometimes you come in too hot, because you've been a leader for a long time. And as I've been in this work and grown in my professional capacity as well, it- you know, 20 years ago plus, and still today, this idea that leaders need to be strong, leaders need to not show any weakness, leaders need, you need to be in charge. Like, there's the still old school leadership style that's out there. And then there is this more modern, more progressive, this I'm human, you're human. Like, you are in charge, but there's lots of ways to be a leader. It doesn't have to be with control and fear and I'm right, you're wrong. I'm always going to find someone to blame.
Right. And I believe I'm a positive disruptor with my ideas, that I want to be the innovative person, which I am, and provide extraordinary experiences. But I hire people that are smarter than me.
Mm,
I want to be, I want to be the CEO. I don't want to be the CFO or the COO. I want to be the CEO with my vision and strategy. And they are the ones that fill in my gap. They are my blindfolds. My
hmm.
executive leadership team are my blindfolds, and they're the ones that make me look great.
Hmm.
I work for them, they don't work for me. And I work for the institution to amplify our message.
Hmm.
When you think about it in that way, that's how you have that teamwork together. It's not a control factor for me. My goal is for them to move on and become either the CEO themselves one day, or for
Hmm.
me to be out and amplify for us to grow our mission and our philanthropy. And if you have an executive team that is working together with you, that allows me to do what I love to do. I don't
Hmm.
like to be in the weeds. I
Hmm.
want them to, they're experts in what they do, and us strategizing together can come up with amazing things and do amazing things together.
It makes me think of the concept of servant leadership, is what you're describing. Like, you're there to serve your team, right? Your people, to help them maximize their abilities, their roles to carry out the mission that you are holding the beacon for of your organization.
Right. And I think, COVID really made a lot of people see that, the old hierarchy way that you were talking about is probably not the best way. No one thought that we were going to be sitting behind our screens or at home and not being able to operate our businesses, some that closed down, some that, had to, be flexible and hybrid. And so what I've noticed with after the COVID incident is there's a lot of anxiety and mental health. And my approach or the way I approach things have to come with a little bit more care. There's
Mm-hmm.
one thing as you think about it, there's empathy and there's accountability. You can do both, right?
Right.
You can be empathetic to the situation, but you can still hold people accountable to their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they pair both together. Those are the things that I talk about with my team. I
Mm-hmm.
can definitely empathize to what's going on in the background, but also hold you to the standard of the accountability of the goals that we worked on together. And
Mm-hmm.
that may look like, you know what, you look tired. Why don't you go home? Take the day off because you're not showing up like you usually do. Is there something wrong? What's going on in the background?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's going to have a great day every day.
No, no. Um, and the transparency, the authenticity you spoke about, and also the vulnerability that we all know Brene Brown has been talking about for a long time, and how this is a transformative leadership style. I mean, it's transformative in a way of being, but it's transformative for the team and it's transformative for the organization. And I just think the more we can talk about how you can do the yes and, like you said, you can be direct, you can have expectations, and you can be authentic and vulnerable and caring and relational. It's all of it.
Yes. Thank you for highlighting that because I think a lot of people feel that you have to come in hot
Right.
to get something done. And honestly, that's not the vibe now in the global environment that we live or work. And I think I attribute my success to being able to have those authentic and personal conversations that lead to outcomes that we're striving for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's move to your outcomes and let's move to pop culture and let's talk about our current day and age with embracing and highlighting diversity and equity in a challenging time.
Well, we have a strategic and operational plan at the Museum of Pop Culture where diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is embedded. So it's what we do on a daily basis. That's our mission. I understand that there's things going on in the global environment, but we are here to serve the community. We have groundbreaking educational programs. Right now, marginalized stories are being, erased in some areas. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're telling those stories that aren't being told. We're not erasing history. Right now, we have a 1969 Stratocaster guitar of Jimi Hendrix. And where
Nice.
was he when he was playing that? He was playing that during civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
We are one of the first museums to highlight hip hop as a genre in a museum. When the museum opened in 2000, in 1997, we were collecting all of the hip hop artifacts. We are one of the largest collectors of hip hop in the world. And so we really have been doing this since 2000. And now, fast forward in 2023, it was the 50th anniversary of hip hop. We
Hmm.
just most recently had our first Indian film festival, and my latest exhibit is Asian comics.
Hmm.
And so the community that surrounds me here in the Pacific Northwest make up some of those diverse communities. And that's what the museum is here, is to educate, is to inspire, and is to really highlight those stories.
Hmm. I, as I was digging into all of this and thinking about pop culture, and I do want to get your take on what is pop culture. I'm gonna lead in like this. Pop culture always had this time period for me in my brain, And then as I dug in more, I realized, and this is probably obvious to many people listening, that the Renaissance was pop culture during the Renaissance, right? Like wherever we are in time, would we call that pop culture?
You know what? I think that pop culture reflects who we are and who we aspire to be. And so it's an essential part of our life. It defines us and we defined it. It's something that's fluidly moving. Pop culture is global language. Everyone in every fandom, you could be a sci-fi fandom, a fashion fandom, an anime fandom, a music fandom. So it really is ever moving. It's timeless because it's the past, it's the current, and it's the future.
It's everything.
It is.
It's everything. And it keeps changing. And this is so when we talk about preserving, celebrating and preserving pop culture, what are we talking about?
Well, I mean, at the museum, we don't just reflect culture. We believe that we have a responsibility to preserve it and uplift stories that historically have been marginalized or ignored. But pop culture is powerful through which we understand ourselves and each other. Every day it's changing. You think about it right now, a lot of people are talking about White Lotus, or you're talking about F1, and Lewis Hamilton and all the things that he's doing, or the Renaissance that you're saying, or the Kendrick Lamar. I mean, when would you have a halftime show that you had this past Super Bowl?
Right.
Super Bowl has its own fandoms. I'm from Philadelphia myself. There's so much history around that of, greasing the poles and the parade and the mummers and different things like that.
Congratulations, by the way, on
Thank
on
you.
that Super Bowl. Yes.
Thank you. But pop culture is a lived experience, part of our society. It's what's going on, what you like, whether you like it or not. It's everything that surrounds us. That's why I say it's a global language. It really is, because you could be in Switzerland and talk about Beyonce. You could be in Kentucky and talk about Beyonce. You could be anywhere, and there's everyone referring to what is hot, what is not, or what is controversial.
When I was reading one of your interviews, you referenced Lenny Kravitz, and so that's a shared affinity, and it just took me right back. Let Love Rule, 1989, and how iconic he was and is, and what he, as just an example, represents, and how it changes. I mean, it influences. It's part of the fabric of our lives, like what we live through and what is going on. It does define us, our memories, and the time, and it's such a, for me, these different moments, these different figures, these different periods, they represent so much more than the memory. And I see how your work at the museum is to expand and immerse, and how people of all flavors and cultures and ages learn, reimagine, and grow from the experience.
Pop culture is multi-generational, and the things that we have in our museum, like sci-fi or Star Trek, you know, we're on our way and we're shortlisted to the Museums and Heritage Awards of our first exhibit that we did under my care in January of 2024, Massive, The Power of Pop Culture, which really is a window into work that we do. It's talking about activism. It's talking about stardom. It's talking about fandom. It's talking about Gone Too Soon, and how pop culture really influences our lives, our choices, what we wear, what we eat, who we hang out with. It's also educational when you think about gaming and what's going on, and the evolution of the controller, of different controllers, from Nintendo to the Switchback, to Fortnite. And so it surrounds everything. If you remember back in the day, in my time, it was Atari. Look how far we have
Yes.
come.
Yes.
If you think of the
Yes.
iPhone, I had a beeper and what that brought back and what that may entail and things like that. So, that's pop culture in so many different ways. And there's so many
Yeah.
different fandoms, but what it does is it sparks a memory. Like you said, let love roll. I remember that. I have the book. I remember that time and thinking about it. And fast forward, now Lenny's on tour with his Blue Electric tour, touring around the world. But, I'm sure when you're at that concert and he plays one of those iconic songs from Let Love Roll, that takes you back to your first concert with Lenny
Yeah.
and why you ever became a fan about the words that he said. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
think about Bob Dylan and some of these songs, where were they in the world, or were we fighting a war at the time? Or We Are the
Mm-hmm.
World, when
Mm-hmm.
all of the artists came together for one purpose, to share. Thriller is another one when you think of
Yeah.
Michael Jackson and Halloween and
Yep.
things like that. People
Mm.
they're doing now Thriller parades all around the world. But think about when that first came out. That
Yeah.
was like a breakout song for Michael Jackson with that red jacket. And that's a memory that will always there. In our massive exhibit, I had an opportunity to curate one little small piece. And for me, we have in our permanent collection Purple Rain, Prince's
Mm.
cloud-based guitar when he
Wow.
was on that iconic bike with the lace shirt and the hat. And we have all those in our permanent collection.
That is
And when you
awesome.
see that Purple Rain album cover, for some, it's a huge memory. For me, because that's what was prevalent at the time. For
Yes.
others, it's an opportunity to learn about it. And
Yes.
what I see when families come to the museum, you see all these different generations of a family that are talking about what happened during that time, or kids talking about what's hot. And
Yep.
so those are the conversations that echo the hallways of the museum, because they're learning about the past, the present, the future, and it
Mm-hmm.
inspires young creators to create themselves. And who knows what will happen down the line.
Awesome. That's inspiring. So we're from the same genre. I remember Atari well, Pong before that, and I had the pager for several years. I still have a little post-traumatic stress reaction to every time my pager would go off, which meant it's nothing it was nothing necessarily that great. But I had to say one memory that you totally triggered when you had me going on down with Lenny. Gosh, early 90s, the Warfield in San Francisco, my friends and I pushed our way to the front. We were in the front standing, and he went across and he was giving us all like high fives or smacking our hands. And all of a sudden I felt something in my hand, and I'm holding a Lenny Kravitz etched pick from his guitar pick. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I'm like, why am I having this association? So incredible. When you talk about, so I really want to highlight and validate how you bring your values to your practice as a leader and to the museum. And with this diversity, you have talked about, and what I've read about bringing out the best in everyone and using everyone's strengths. Like everyone has these strengths. And this is something we talk about a lot on this show, is in our neurodiverse world, in our different world where everyone has a purpose, everyone has a strength, everyone has value. A lot of people can get behind that concept, but then when it comes to running an organization or a company, it's like, yeah, but maybe other organizations can do with that. We have to do A, B, C, and D. So I'm curious of how you see that and how you actually put that into practice.
Well, let's take my executive leadership team, for example. I know that my CFO, that him and I, if I want to work out a financial model to see if I want to open and close on a Tuesday, or if we're going to lose money and we're trying to purchase tickets, I can go to him to financially model and think about it in that way. When I think of my CEO, or my COO, they're in charge of our extraordinary experience and the museum experience, opening, closing, safety, flow of traffic, those types of things. When I think of my chief curator, we're thinking about what do people want to see and what exhibit should we put in there. And so when you're putting that all together, or my vice president of marketing and how do I get my thought leadership out, or my vice president of education, when you put that all together and you're planning an exhibit opening, all those facets are actually in one where we can have a workshop. I like to workshop a lot. So instead of having these leadership meetings where everything, there's leadership meetings where you're talking about, policies and procedures. But what we do really best together is workshop. When we want to say from beginning to end, how do we want to make our visitor feel when they walk in the door? And that is the makeup of my executive leadership team. Again, I put the polish on top. I may have the vision, but these are the experts that are solving it together. And what is the outcome at the end that we want to accomplish? If you think of it that way, that's how I really have these conversations when we put things on and when we think about it. We have the expert in the money, the other person in the experience, the educational part of it, the museum experience and the curation of what we're seeing, the food and beverage that go on top of it, so that really you're kind of planning the 12 steps of travel, but you're planning the entire experience from when you enter to when you leave. And how does that make you feel? And is that going to make you share and have someone come back and become a loyal fan?
So where did you get that? Where did you get that vision? Because I understand how you have assembled your team to allow a carrying out of the vision, which you are chartered with. Have you always been a visionary?
I don't know where I really got it from, to be very honest with you. I just think that way. I think, my experience in the travel industry really helped me, working at Expedia, working on the cruise lines, really travel hospitality. That's my forte, food, beverage, entertainment. And for me, I know what I like and I know what my experiences are. And highlighting some of the companies that I work through in travel and hospitality brought it into my business experience, adding the lens of revenue and community on top of it. So I think it's probably in the jobs that you see on my resume, working at Expedia or working at Royal Caribbean, they're heavily focused on the person or the visitor or the audience. And then I take that in for myself. And I think it's just been the growth of my journey and that I've put it all together.
Yeah.
And that, when I thought about if I'm ever going to be a CEO, what could I do? How would I put my vision together? I thought long and hard, before I went on the journey to apply for the role. Some of the things were, how was I treated in other organizations that I didn't want to happen if I was a CEO? What was I going to address? The microaggressions, some of the, things about women in leadership as a BIPOC woman, all those things. I said, when I get to be CEO, I'm going to right the wrongs that were done to me. I'm going to make sure that I build this type of culture, again, with empathy and accountability at the same time, but with transparency. When I was growing up in the world from the 80s through the 90s and 2000s, in a lot of the big organizations I was working in, there wasn't a lot of transparency. There wasn't a lot of understanding why decisions were made. And I decided that when I became a leader, I was always going to be transparent, because transparency doesn't mean that you have to be right with the answer that somebody wants to hear, but you can tell them and educate them on the why, on the why you made the decision.
Yes.
You may not like the decision, but at least you know the why and the reasoning behind it. And we can agree to disagree. But I think that is how I operate. And I think it stems from some of the wrongs that were done to me or things that I saw in my own self when dealing with other managers in my own personal career, that I was like, I'm going to correct that because it bothered me. And if I knew if it bothered me, it bothered other people, or that's what people chatter about in the hallways, right?
Yeah.
Is how they are treated. And so if you're transparent, I tell anyone, you can come into my office. I have an EA. If you want to schedule time, I'll sit down with you. If you want to understand a decision, sometimes I actually do all staffs to talk about why I made a decision and why we're working with these people or things or doing those, events, because people just want to understand the why. And I think that is the sweet spot. When
Yes.
you go quiet and you don't say anything and you that allows people to fester. It
Hmm.
allows people to make or assume. So why not just be transparent? It may not be what they want to hear, but at least you are respected for telling them why behind the decision, and how they choose to take it is
Yes.
on them.
It's so that's very refreshing, and it sounds so common sense, and it unfortunately isn't, but we want it to become that. So it's so important that you're saying this, that as leaders, there are hard decisions to make, and we want to be trusted by our teams. And the way you earn trust is honesty and transparency and explaining what the hard stuff is. And I have this memory of the first time I was in a leadership position. I was a young psychologist working at a community nonprofit, first job, finally being in a real role after graduate school and license and all that stuff. And I found myself, the clinic director left, and the executive director, who I was close to, who was a mentor of mine, basically said, "So, Dan, you got a choice. Either you step into the director role, I'm going to find someone else." And I was brand new. I knew I didn't have the experience. And so, but I said, okay, I don't want another someone above me that I didn't have a good fit with. So, bottom line is, I formed a leadership team with the veteran people, and I asked for a 6-month transition. But here's why I'm telling the story. The executive leadership was on me and the team for our billing. We had government Medi-Cal, government contracts, and we were never billing enough. We were always in trouble. I'd go into this weekly meeting and just be like lambasted by the CFO. And I finally said, and everyone was really unhappy at the center. And I finally said to the CFO, "Can you help me understand how the whole thing works? Like, from start to finish, how does this thing work?" So I understood it. I said, "Okay, well, thank you. That makes sense. Now I'm going to go back to the team and I'm going to explain to them how it all works and why we miss and how we cannot." And it was like such common sense to me at the time. This whole team was, they're like, it was like I did something so amazing. They were like, "Thank you. We had never understood how this worked. We always knew we were in trouble. We never felt like we were doing enough. And now we know what our markers are." And so it was this pivotal experience for me that I have taken in the last couple decades of, let's just keep this simple. Let's just be honest and transparent and lean into the hard conversations, because people actually appreciate it, even if it's always not always what they want to hear.
Right. Exactly.
So earlier you talked about your team does what they do, so you get to do what you love. What do you
Yes.
love? What do you love to do?
I'm the face of the organization. I love closing big deals. I love amplifying our message. I love being out there talking to our donors, to our community partners. I love doing speeches. I love being on podcasts. So for me, I am the face of the organization. I am the lead fundraiser for the organization. But what's so awesome is that I know everyone's job within my organization. Right now, we don't have a marketing person and we're looking for one. So I'm spending time with my marketing team at a level that I don't get to spend. But also, I'm learning more about how we can improve processes and procedures down there, and what we can set for new goals as we move into our budgeting season in the fall. So for me, I can do every role within my organization. It's something that, part of me needs to understand and learn. So I spend time in each department understanding what are the positives, the negatives, what we can improve upon, and really working with my leaders to understand like the challenges that they're facing. If I don't understand what's going on, how can I really be representing them to my board, or the
Hmm.
challenges of the organization, or to funders? So for me, knowing what we might need to replace, or what is on our minds, or what keeps us up at night, especially for my chief people officer as a nonprofit, what are some of the outliers of living expenses and things like that I can talk about to better our compensation programs or our well-being programs. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, a big focus for me is well-being. As I noticed, with FMLA, one of the biggest things as I measure is how many people are out on FMLA and for what. And what we see is, again, trending from COVID, it's the belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It's the white noise of the presidential things that are going on. It's the after effects of COVID of everybody wasn't sure if they were going to get sick or everything that went along with it with the anxiety. And so for me, those are important for me to understand so that we can put in better wellness programs,
Mm-hmm.
put in better practices, maybe have longer vacations or days without meetings and not being on teams and different things like that, to innovate and help with our team with stress,
Mm-hmm.
to make it a place where they want to come to and make it a place where they know that it is okay to not have a good day or have a headache or go home and to
Mm-hmm.
take vacation and to delegate and different things like that.
I know wellness is very important to you personally and for your organization. And you have spoken about your own experiences of burnout. And as a result, your own practices for practicing your own self care rituals and modeling those for your team.
Yes. I give probably huge medals to anyone that was a CFO or a CPO during the pandemic, as well as a CEO. But, as a nonprofit, when I was at my former role, we closed down for 5 months. And for nonprofits, we have small operating budgets. And, it was a very stressful time for me. And, after I left the organization, I had 30 days to recover before I took on the CEO. I remember the story and I always tell it. I was signing my last CFO deal and I'm just packing up my office and I drove home and I'm like, I'm feeling kind of funny, right? I'm like, I have a little headache, but I got 30 days off before my new role. I'm going to travel to Paris. I had everything planned. The next day I woke up and I was sick for those 30 days, sick. And talking to my coach and the doctors, it was just the stress of being in COVID and moving through that my body relaxed and was like, oh, Michele, you are off for 30 days and
Yep.
everything came flying out. And when I was just sick, the doctor didn't know what I was going to do. And I was like, I can't go into a new job like this. And how am I going to get out of this? Because coming in at a higher role to an organization through, coming out of COVID, I need to really take care of myself a little bit more. And so I put some practices into place, and I already had practices, but I put some hard practices into place in terms of how I wanted to operate. Number one was changing some of my eating styles because I ate terrible during COVID. Number two was more exercise. And number three was actually sticking to my doctors and dentist appointments. I think we all let things go during COVID, but also, I have a coach for executive presence, but I also have one for therapy for myself. I've joined groups of like-minded CEOs to bounce ideas off of. I have hard boundaries with my calendar, making sure I do get lunches or a break. And I instill that into my team too, to be able to take those breaks, to be able to take my vacation, for them to take your vacation. And so those are some of the things that I do for myself, along with it's mind, body, spirit. It's something that you have to practice. It's not one thing. You have to do all of those in tandem to keep yourself going. And that's even with your calendar, making sure you have breaks in, remember when you're back in Zoom, in COVID, where we're like back-to-back calls, Zooms, not eating on the phone, all those types of things.
Yep.
We were running ourselves like a 24/7 car that never had an ending highway. And that just doesn't work. The other big thing is sleep, making sure I get the proper sleep.
Yes. So key.
Yeah.
So key.
It's those little things that really matter that if you let go add up in time. The other big thing is stress. Stress causes disease.
Yes, it does.
So really
Dis-ease.
your gut health and things like that. So I'm very particular about that. I
Mhm.
practice it. I, get my blood work done, make sure I have all the right nutrients and things like that. It's just something very important to me.
You said on a recent podcast that I was listening to, and I believe you were quoting someone else and paraphrasing, and I wrote it down because I loved it. If it doesn't, so it's about boundaries. If it doesn't let you grow, glow, or flow,
It's a hell
let it go. Yeah, or is it a hell no? Is that
it's
what
a
it is? It's a
hell
hell
no,
no.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yes. It's a hell no. So, hear that, everyone? Here, say it again, Michelle, for everyone, so they can hear it in your words.
If it does, yes. If it doesn't let you, this was my New Year's.
I
This is
like
my,
it.
it's my theme for 2025. If it doesn't let you grow, glow, or flow, it's a hell
The
no.
hell no. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
in personal
yeah.
and my professional relationships.
Yes,
If it doesn't
yes,
make sense, right?
yeah.
It is what it is.
And this is hard, but you have also talked about work at work and be home at home. And again, this is boundaries, and it's so hard to do for any of us, particularly leaders. It seems that, I mean, it never ends. There's always something. But as you had pointed out, in this previous podcast, like, there are emergencies, and there are, but not most things aren't emergencies. Most things do not need to be dealt with until 8 or 9 or whenever the start date is the next morning. And I think that was something for me as a leader that I really had to learn, and with the help of my wife and my kids, especially in the younger days, of being like, hey, you're home, can waking up early, doing email at the counter, and like all of this stuff that I really had to learn, because I was so stressed and overwhelmed and feeling if I didn't keep up, I was just going to get swallowed. But the inbox is never empty. The issues never stop coming. No matter, it's a river. It's just a river. So you just need to know when to step into the river and when to step out of the river.
Well, I mean, for me, unless it's a safety issue,
Right, right,
then it really can wait till the morning. Like, what is that going to solve? Answering the email at 10 o'clock. I think
right.
that we all can wait. And there is, I call it grace sets the pace.
Mm,
So give people that grace. On a Friday night, you don't need to email me after 6 if you feel like it, but I just know, and don't be offended that I won't answer it,
right,
because I want to give my family, my friends, my personal health and well-being that grace to decompress, to spend time with friends. And again, if it's not an emergency, if it's
right.
not a safety
Yes,
issue, if we can wake up the next morning and hit that deadline or set expectations. But that's how I look at it. And I think that in the ever changing world of digital, where text messages and everybody wants things on demand, I think, we can work our work week, but let the weekends and the nights be for ourselves, because that's how you're going to show up better at work.
yes. Okay, as we wind down here, I'm going to leave you with a two-part question. What is your vision for your continual growth as a people-centered leader? And what is your vision for taking MOPOP to where you plan on taking MOPOP?
I will start with my vision for myself. I'm in the middle of writing a book, and so I'm always looking to do that and finish the book and put it out there and talk about my leadership journey and maybe help other people around the world. Hopefully, somebody reads it, but it's an accomplishment for me. But it's not only an accomplishment for me, it's my eulogy for my mom.
Mm,
It's my love letter and eulogy for my mom. When my mom passed away, I wasn't ready, and I don't feel like I think I was in a state of shock. And so now that I've had the time to go through grief, this book really is my tribute to her, around her being a single mother and growing a leader like myself to where I am today. So that
beautiful.
is my journey for that.
Yes.
I think my second one for the Museum of Pop Culture is to continue to amplify our mission. We are in some very extraordinary times. I have 80,000 artifacts in our care. I'd like to grow our membership and our fandoms from around the world, not just locally, but globally. In the next 3 years, I'd like to grow the membership to, 20 to 30,000. We're at, 4,100. I'd like to grow our philanthropy and have people really come back and invest in our operating programs. When you're buying a ticket to the museum, you're supporting the mission of what we do. We have 25 years of great educational programs supporting schools. And right now, if you think about it, arts and culture are being taken out of schools. And we are bridging that gap with cultural literacy with the programs that we are running here. And how can you help us amplify that mission? If you want to be a sponsor with me to support those programs, that's what I'm looking to grow it bigger, better, larger, and really grow our MOPOP family and community. When you walk into my doors, you are part of our family, and that's how we treat you. And we want you to tell somebody about that what you've learned, what you loved, and what inspired you.
Let's do this. Let's do this, everyone. Michele, tell everyone where to find all the things to visit, to sign up, to be a member, to donate, all of it.
You can go to mopop.org. You can see and sign up for a membership. You can find out about all of our events, and you can donate on the click to donate on our website. So I really appreciate the time to sit down with you. I appreciate the time that you are highlighting me. Representation matters more than ever. So I thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast, to share my story, but also to share the mission of the museum.
Thank you for sharing your story and the museum with us, and your mom. Just a gift for your mom, and your mom has gifted the world with you. An amazing, amazing person, and she is, I'm sure, very proud.
Thank you so much.
Here are 5 key takeaways from the show. Number 1, leadership begins with empathy. Michele reminds us that leading people starts with understanding who's right in front of you and building trust through vulnerability and care. Number 2, failure is an opportunity for growth. Instead of blame, analyze and improve the process. It's not who failed, it's what broke. Number 3, pop culture is a global language. From Prince's Purple Rain to Lenny Kravitz's guitar pick, pop culture connects generations, tells untold stories, and shapes identity. 4, wellness is non-negotiable. After burning out post-COVID, Michele put hard boundaries and self-care practices in place and guides her team to do the same. 5, if it doesn't let you grow, glow, or flow, it's a hell no. Michele's mantra for life and leadership: simple, bold, empowering, and one that I am adopting. Thank you for listening to the show and sending it to everyone you think will benefit. Thank you for your 5-star reviews, for subscribing and being a part of our amazing community. And remember, we have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.